Yeah.
Right here.
Bye.
Boy, it's getting hot in here. Okay.
Hold on,
So
not yet,
this will put it
Maribeth.
in.
Got a couple more. I got Joanne.
Maribeth.
Maribeth.
All right, very pretty.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so this one is from Bobby. Bobby Sisko. Dear Maribeth, today I learned from Kevin and Armand that your dad had passed away. I felt the need to convey to you and the entire LaMarre family how saddened I am by this loss. My history with your dad is as follows. I met Mo in the summer of 1978 when I came home to find him sitting in my living room in Hermosa Beach after traveling cross-country with Armand and their young French passenger, Gilles. That first image of him is still etched in my mind 40 years later. Mo sitting cross-legged, conversing at an almost explosive level about a gamut of subjects: culture, philosophy, religion, politics, gender politics, in 1978, and God knows what else. He was like a volcano, spewing out thoughts and concepts as fast as he could get them out of his mouth. I thought, who is this guy? Gilles had gotten badly injured on the trip west, and after a hospital stay in Colorado, came to Hermosa to meet up with Armand and Mo, who had continued on to California without him. Then Gilles' mom arrived unexpectedly from Paris to check on her son's condition. This absurdly motley crew was now living in my house on the beach, which was full of people engaged in typical late 70s California, somewhat post-hippie activities. Most seemed to me to be in a state of near manic ecstasy. Armand was too burnt out from the long trip to continue with the trip to San Francisco that he had promised Gilles. So Gilles, his mom, Mo, and I took Armand's van and went on the road trip to San Fran. It was on that trip that I permanently bonded with your dad and Gilles and his mom. It was one of the most memorable 4 days of my life. For years after, when Mo would speak of that trip, he would say that he initially thought something was wrong with me, since whatever happened would cause hysterical laughter on my part. His thinking was, why does this guy think everything's so funny? Then he would say, halfway up the coast, I got it. You were right. Everything was funny. And we'd laugh. I knew nothing then of Mo's previous life as a husband, father, teacher, etc. For me, he was a fresh slate. But I soon realized that Mo was basically in the process of, as the cliche goes, blowing his mind, in a positive sense, to my way of thinking. At precisely this time, after 2 years of struggling in California and down to my last $100 and a hairbreadth away from having to give up the ghost and retreat back to Rhode Island in despair, I had miraculously gotten a job as an airline flight attendant. This suddenly meant money, lots of time off, free travel, most importantly, pulling off the California dream. In that respect, I was enjoying a mind-blowing event myself. The big difference being, coming from an early 70s hippie background with the attendant psychedelic experimentation, I had already blown my mind in college and again when I first saw California, and yet again with the recent scoring of the heaven-sent airline job. Armand, with the experience of my earlier multiple epiphanies, I was pre-aware of just how life-changing, illuminating, and joyous going through one can be. I was ready and more than primed for what I knew was happening to me in that moment. And now, not only was I having another one, miracle of miracles, I was driving up the California coast with this person who was visibly undergoing his first, and middle-aged no less, wow. Epiphanies are even more dramatic and profound when shared with someone else. It was my great fortune to have your dad along for that happening. For decades, people would ask me, what is it with you and Mo? What the hell is this bond between you two guys? And I would relay this tale of our journey together to San Fran with Gilles and his mom. Near as I could explain it, these simultaneous, mutually shared, mind-blowing experiences acted as some sort of spiritual personality annealing process, joining us together like some kind of consciousness-binding superglue. Very superglue, as it turned out. Despite 40 years of being separated by 3,000 miles with only my brief yearly vacations to enjoy each other's company, that bond never weakened. Mo's mantra was the love had to be unconditional, and he lived by that without fail. Mo never had much money, but he enriched my life and happiness immeasurably. He shared his home, his time, his empathy, his car, his stash, his thoughts, and his love with me fully and without reservation. One of us began one of us would begin to express some cosmic, convoluted, inchoate concept. And before one sentence got out, the other would finish the thought and nail it. And then we would laugh, long, loud, and deeply heartfelt laughter. We did a lot of that together. That is a rare and wonderful thing to find in a friend. I appreciated that Mo had harsh childhood and listened with deep sympathy when he spoke of it. I knew his history with his family and children was complicated, though I never pressed for details. And I know that the Mo I knew was deeply compassionate, genuinely caring, intelligent, resolutely non-judgmental, and generous of spirit. I've been fortunate to have many great friends. Mo, your dad, was the best friend I will ever have in this life. I will miss him and think of him every day. He cared deeply for his children, and his remorse concerning the pain he had caused them and his marriage due to his actions was palpable and permanent. I make no excuses for him regarding any collateral damage and painful disruptions that resulted from the path he traveled. Inevitably, with every rebirth, there is an accompanying death. But I have always felt the events that occurred prior to our meeting and that transformed him and his relationship with his previous life were in some sense beyond his control. The Mo I met in 1978 was undergoing what seemed to be, as I witnessed it, a sincere and voluntary change of consciousness, an event that can bring great fulfillment and also pain. As a friend who loved him, I hope he is afforded some measure of forgiveness, if any is needed. Finally, I take comfort from all those who showed kindness to my dear friend. Armand, who generously provided him with a beautiful home for many years. Karen Berger, who loved him to distraction. Jim O'Connell, who cared for him as deeply as I did. His children and grandchildren, whom he loved and took such great pride. And Kevin, who despite their polar opposite political and world views, made it his mission to provide company and assistance in his final years. What they did for him, they did for me. And I'm grateful. So Maribeth, my love and sympathy to you and your family. Know that I loved your dad and I share your sadness. And Godspeed to your dad, Mo. He was the best friend I will ever have.
All right.
Very well written.
We got one here from Gilles. We got a letter. Hey, don't go, guys. We got Gilles, who was mentioned in that, and this comes from Aix-en-Provence, and this is the boy we're talking about. And Denise is going to read it with a French accent.
Because it is from Gilles, so it must be with the French accent.
She's Scottish, but
Yeah.
It was beginning of August 1978 in Providence, and I realized I'd met with my guitar and all the dreams of a young traveler, some kind of beautiful peoples. After an appointment for a sharing drive to LA, following a classified ad seen in the Brown University, the harmony I have felt in the green van, on the way to paradise with Armand, Mo, and a student we dropped off in Iowa who was sort of wonderful perfume, a perfume of humanity. There was Armand, the serious man with his great strength inside of him, Mr. DeLuise, who showed you in one book all the love, the protection that you need. There was Mo, a smile, just a smile, and a so tender glance. I've never seen anyone so open. You can talk about everything with him, and there is never any judgment. Instantly, I felt good with these two guys. I don't know why. I could fly with them to the moon with no worry. We talked a lot with Mo. Armand was driving, listening to us and listening to the guitar too, a very patient man. We arrived at the Rocky Mountain after a few days, and the accident happened. Mo wrote a nice story about that, but the only thing I remember is that he saved my life. Mo was like an Indian. He was a free man. No limit in his action. He stopped my bleeding, breaking his new, expensive glasses to cut my long sleeves. Following 1 week at St. Anthony's Hospital in Denver, after that I remember their smile when I arrived at the bus station in LA. I discovered the house in Hermosa Beach, and the ocean, and the girls doing the roller skate with their long legs on the ocean promenade. And mostly I met Bobby, the fourth musketeer of this beautiful story, another shiny personality. In this team, Mo was the big brother of a magic civil ship. 2 weeks after we met, I had the impression that I knew these guys from a very long time, like if we create a family. When we drive to Frisco with Mo, Bobby, and my mother, we were like on the road movie. We met a lot of people, invited to incredible houses where people play guitar and sing. Everything was light, fluid. We were always laughing. I still remember the laugh of Bobby saying, "Mo, Mo," and the beautiful feeling we carry all together. I remember the time we used to walk with Mo around Hermosa Beach for fishing, for walking around the pier. It was quiet, peaceful, and beautiful moments. Now Mo is gone. His huge heart was the real cement of our relationship. When in 1991 we met again in Providence, I remember his bright and shiny face when he saw us, happy to be together again. The sailing boat cruise we did around Newport was a great moment all together. Armand, Art, Karen, Nicolas. And in my children, Guillaume and Caroline, remember him very well, like a very thoughtful man. Same thing in October 1996 when I spent several days with him and Art in Warwick, sharing their everyday life, with Armand always here to care about them like a protector. When in 2004 Mo went to Provence with Karen and Nicolas, he was so very happy to discover Europe, the old cities, the archaeology. I remember Cassis, Fontaine, La Sureton. Always smiley, he discovered Alice and Justine, my other daughters. He plays puzzle with them and they paint together beautiful drawings. He was patient and full of attention. I wanted this day you celebrate him, to talk about the Mo I knew. A man happy to meet people, to open his heart and to help and protect his friend in a great self-giving. And with a real sense of fidelity, with a real love for his friend Bobby, Armand, Karen, Nicholas, whom I salute. I wish I could be with you and meet all your family. Have a really beautiful day, full of friendship and love. Big kisses from France. And Guillaume, Caroline, Alice, and Faust, and Justine.
Really nice. One last one. My daughter just walked in. Maxine, come on in.
Oh, hello.
Maxine, want to read this one? Want to read this? For me? I will. All right, one more. Sorry, guys. Thanks, Denise. I know Bobby was an English major, so he was a little verbose. I hope I'm not as much. Mo, what is the measure of a man? Is it his physical stature? Mo's was impressive at first encounter. 6'2", 240, maybe. Beard thick as a hedge. What is the measure of a man? Is it his biological proliferation? A girl, Joyce, a boy, Greg, another boy, Keith, a girl, Maribeth, and yet one more girl, Carolyn. And all the children of those children. Is a man's worth measured in his deeds? The deeds of his offspring? The deeds of those he touched and influenced? I can only measure the deeds I witnessed firsthand during the second half of Mo's life, roughly age 50 to 90. The first half is best left to those who were present, and Mo's retelling and the fuzzy recollections. I can only accurately document what I observed, and even those memories may be tainted by the obscurity of time. I first encountered the larger-than-life Mo when I heard his mildly intoxicated, booming voice echoing off Narragansett Bay as he pontificated, unabashed, among the guests gathered at the waterfront lawn of the Van Nostrand's West Barrington Cottage, July 4th, 1977. I made a sophomoric comment, and he lashed out at me. "BS," he roared. 1 year later, the slightly subdued but no less pedantic Mo rode shotgun in my 1972 Dodge passenger van, packed with my belongings on their relocation to Southern California. 2 passengers, strangers, hitchhiking a ride via WBRU's Nomads Lane joined us. One was a young graduate student whose name eludes me, on his way to study writing at the University of Iowa, who rode with us for just 1 day and 1 night. The other was a young Frenchman from Aix-en-Provence, a doctor's son, who could have traveled first class but instead chose to hitch a ride with a man in midlife crises and an overly idealistic young man setting out on the threshold of life. The 19-year-old was Gilles Farad. He was on an adventure quest to see America and return to France with a Fender Stratocaster. Following an accident in Colorado, he would owe his life to Mo. Gilles fell off the Great Divide and landed arms first into a tangle of rocks and trees. Blood shot through the wounds made by his compound fractures like water through a fire hose. "Help, help," he called, but there was nothing I could do. He made it down to the road where Mo drew upon his knowledge of first aid and promptly and properly applied tourniquets in the now unconscious Frenchman. Gilles had already lost a lot of blood and snow had started falling, preventing a rescue helicopter from landing to transport him to triage. We waited an hour for an ambulance to drive up, and the boy surely would have bled white had Mo not stopped the gushing. Gilles' children, his architectural feats in southern France, all those he touched, all those his children touched, all their deeds and actions were made possible because Mo saved that young man's life that day. How do you measure a man? Is it measured by the expressions of sudden awareness when he encounters a group of hippie lesbians gathered at a Colorado Springs bookstore and realizes that this is no longer Eisenhower's America and that he must join that hippie caravan trekking the Rocky Flats to protest the manufacture of nuclear weapons? Is it measured in the chutzpah to march up to Allen Ginsberg and announce, "I'm a friend of Art Berger. I want to say hello and announce that I too will now howl. And I want to find out if I had a vision, or you had a vision, or he had a vision to find out about eternity." Back on the road, 3 weeks in Hermosa Beach, in a campaign to convince Mo that not returning to his job at Barrington High was definitely not the best way to stick it to the man. So, devoid of cash to buy a bus ticket, Mo decided that hitchhiking 3,000 miles back to Rhode Island was somehow not an insane decision for a 50-year-old man who had twice voted for Richard Nixon. He made it back to Rhode Island somehow, but did not return to his chair to lecture social studies. The disappointment of not being the head football coach was more than he could face. Some time passed, and once again Mo found another way to measure up to the challenge. He shunned all but a tent, a sleeping bag, and a mess kit, and spent a winter on a solo spirit quest in the hills above San Jose. He then managed once again to ride his thumb back to Rhode Island, where he landed in the generosity of good friends like Jerry DBAs and Art Berger, who gave him shelter, counseling, and the spiritual awareness to find his inner muse, the painter of dreamscapes. What is the measure of a man? Is it the caliber of the friends he makes along the way and the commitment and reciprocation those friends afford? When Art had surgery for colon cancer, it was Mo who came to his aid and acted as his personal CNA, making Art comfortable and attending to his every need. Mo helped Art, Art helped others. Is the measure of a man revealed in acrylic brushstrokes and fantastical scenes put to canvas? If so, then Mo's measure is abundant in the many paintings and his unique vision brought to life in his crow's nest apartment overlooking Providence at Sister Dominica Manor. During that period, Mo was my helper and go-to house painter and demolition man to those apartments I bought foolishly believing after I read In the Art of the Deal. Chris was there for some of that. He was my always present first mate as we sailed nearly every day for 5 summers during the early 90s. He helped paint the bottom, sand the hull, and lash down the cover before and after every season. Mo measured up as a yachtsman when we sailed together once more in later years while we circumnavigated Prudence Island with Greg. Mo was excited about this adventure for weeks before as he anxiously awaited stepping on board for what would be his last time on a boat. After that, I sat with him many times as he watched sailboats exit Bullock's Cove and stated with certainty, that must be Greg. Apparently to Mo, any sloop, any size from 20 to 50 feet had Greg at the helm as I navigated the channel out the harbor. What is the measure of a man? Is it the exuberant pride he always exhibited when discussing his grandchildren and the silent pain in his eyes as he worried about the later life troubles of his 3 girls and 2 boys? Was it the excitement at doing the best he could at Christmas time and birthdays trying to give them something he hoped would please them. These were the things he discussed with me in a subtle and understated way. What is the measure of a man? Is it the gentleness of a giant, the acceptance and non-judgment of his friends, and the rage at the system he had once been so immersed in? Is the measure the knowledge that if you were Mo's friend, he would never deny any request, a ride in the middle of the night, or bring in a shovel to help bury the body? Is a man only measured by flawless behavior, or can he be measured by his efforts to overcome his human frailties? With Mo, the glass was always half full, and it may have often been in danger of falling off the shelf, but it was never half empty, because he was on a journey to discover universal truth and universal goodness. Perhaps that is the true measure of a man, his intentions, his kindness, the purity of his thoughts, the lack of malice, and the abundance of humility. Perhaps the measure of a man is the understanding that a battle between good and evil is constant in our mind, and that it is the willingness to engage in that battle on the righteous side that is more important than the victory. From my perspective, during the past 40 years, Mo always measured up in so very many ways. I think you guys saw that one here, right?
We have one from Karen.
Karen didn't send that.
Yes, I did.
All right, now we got one from Karen then.
Yeah, we have one from Karen.
All right.
It's short.
No, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll make you guys more copies.
Okay. Or is this, okay. Okay.
It's nice to see you too. Take care of yourself.
For Mo came into our meeting, the burger and extended family life, because he was my father's Art's best friend. MoJo, as we call him, was without a doubt one of the kindest, most gentle, wisest persons I have ever had the privilege to know and love. There were so many facets to Mo. The philosopher, oh boy, could he go on. What always struck me was how committed and steadfast he was in his core beliefs. He tried to live his life in accordance with his values, as few people manage to do. He would always say, you've got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And that's exactly what he did. The charmer and the teaser. Under that hard, crusty surface he sometimes liked to show, there was the sweetest guy ever. He loved to flirt. When he came to Paris to visit, he charmed the hell out of every one of my girlfriends. The intellectual, the teacher. MoJo was knowledgeable, so well read, always ready to engage in discussions, explain concepts, recommend books. Yes, he could go on, but you could always figure out a way to change the subject if need be. When my New York friends would come up to Rhode Island to visit, they genuinely looked forward to spending time with Mo, and have all expressed how they will miss those moments. So many years, so many memories, one special time stands out from the others. When my father passed away, Mo came to France to spend a month. We took him around the country, to cities, to the countryside, to the coasts. And it was wonderful to watch him soak up the culture, delight in meeting and getting to know new people, discover with gusto the food and wine, marvel at the art and architecture, and witness the history he had studied and taught so many students about. Mo the friend. I could never finish the small tale without mentioning MoJo and Art. What a friendship, what a peer, Mutt and Jeff, Laurel and Hardy, and a little bit of Lennon and McCartney. There was harmony, silent understanding, intellectual exchange, creativity, simple buddies who liked to share an Italian meal in Providence, dear friends there for each other to share whatever they had. The dynamic duo whizzing through Stop and Shop, delighting in how much money they could save with the giant envelope of coupons they had carefully collected, and laughing at my father, who proudly managed to slip out of the supermarket with a goat cheese or two stuffed into his sleeve at 80 years old. And finally, Mo, the guardian angel. As my father, aging and ailing, became ill with Parkinson's, couldn't walk, among other problems, finally ceased to talking, Mo took care of him on a daily basis while we partnered on the phone and during my periodic visits. Art, my dad, could never have stayed in their beautiful home on the bay that long if it weren't for Mo's gentle, loving, diligent, and meticulous care. From cooking, cleaning, hygiene, meds, rides, to the beach, simple moments on the deck, watching the fish jump and the birds fly while enjoying a rum tonic, driving down to Charleston, etc. Mo enabled my father to get the most quality out of his last years. No wife, no nurse, no aide could have done it better with more love. For that, the Berger and Bernier family will forever be grateful. This earth will be a better place for Mo's time here. We will miss him more than words can say. So we have some desserts, an apple pie and vanilla ice cream and some pecan
There's probably a picture here with him. Oh, there's a picture right here with him.
This is their.
And when she makes the soda bread, she comes with barrels like 8-inch, like small 8-inch. But she makes all the soda breads, and they have to be the black ice cream, but it has to be like the little stuff. She makes the but she has her older grandmother's in her house. I got a cauldron, I got a cauldron, a black cast iron cauldron, which I use for big soups. Okay. That was a good one. Yeah. Write a letter like that about me someday.
You took off on us.
No, I wish I had gone with you guys. I would have loved to. I've been one of those. Maybe one of his kids. I told her she's got to practice up. I'll be lucky.